But now we turn to President Trump's legal roller coaster. He's coming off a rocky week of setbacks as the Supreme Court stopped some of his deportations under the Alien Enemies Act and appeared divided over how lower courts should handle his executive order banning birthright citizenship. But Donald Trump has an ace in his legal corner, Attorney General Pam Bondi, who often seems to operate more like his personal attorney than the top law enforcement officer for the country. During her confirmation hearings, Bondi pledged to be independent and vowed that politics would not factor into her decisions.
No one will be prosecuted, investigated because they are a political opponent. The partisanship, the weaponization will be gone. America will have one tier of justice for all. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice. I believe that the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently.
Woo, how things have changed since she was sworn in just over 3 months ago. Now, the New York Times reports that Bondi, quote, sees her role as that of a surrogate, a faithful executor and high-volume messenger compelled to cede ground to, to empowered players in the West Wing and in her own building who exercise significant authority that rivals her own, according to interviews with 20 current and former officials. Perhaps that could also explain why, as the Times points out, she has made at least 36 near-exclusive appearances on Fox News shows during her short tenure. You know, she could come on this show. Joining us now, Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst, and Liz Oyer, former DOJ pardon attorney and federal public defender. Thank you both very much for being here. Sorry for choking on my own words and talking about that. But, I mean, Paul, could you please just explain to viewers how the way Bondi is conducting herself in her job as Attorney General of the United States is so problematic? And did you also hear what Eugene and I heard in that thing? She kind of choked on one tier of justice in those confirmation hearings.
So, Jonathan, when I was a federal prosecutor and went to court, I would say, my name is Paul Butler, and I represent the United States of America. That's what every federal prosecutor says, except that Pam Bondi represents Donald Trump. She's the attorney general of his dreams because she's really more of a political operative.
He's talked about for a long time. He's wanted that, yeah.
He's gotten it, yeah. So, again, when she says that the department is independent, it's not like it's been independent in the previous 200 years. Again, she seems to be taking marching orders from Trump about who to investigate and who to prosecute, including by putting Kash Patel and Don Boningo in charge of federal investigations, in charge of what used to be the world's best law enforcement agency. They have less experience than any other leaders of that agency in the last 100 years.
Liz, you are suing the DOJ for records related to your termination, for your refusal to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. There are others who have resigned because they didn't want to do something that the administration wanted them to do. What does that do, though, for the American people when lawyers like yourself, who've been doing this for a long time, who are not political, right? Your job is to be there no matter who the president is of the United States, no matter who the attorney general is. What does that do for the justice system in this country?
It's really dangerous. I mean, that's the big problem with it, to root out career experts who are trying to use their years of experience to inform the decisions that are being made by the department about key issues related to public safety. That is just dangerous. It's irresponsible, it's reckless, and it makes us less safe as a country. In my case, I was fired. I didn't resign, I was just fired. And that occurred after I gave my advice based on my experience about what I believed was in the interests of our public safety as a country.
Paul, Elise here. I would like to talk about the Trump DOJ's move to basically take out the layer of checks and balance, so to say, before indicting a member of Congress and making it easier to indict members of Congress, federal prosecutors around the country. It'll be easier for them. What is this going to change in the law and in the way that corruption cases against public officials have been previously pursued? And would this, work both ways if it stays in effect? So ostensibly, and a Democrats in power, they could essentially do the same thing.
Yes. So at least I worked at the public integrity section, and whenever there was a considered prosecution of a congressperson, we had to sign off on it, even if the prosecution and investigation originated in a U.S. attorney's office. We had to sign off on it because we were the experts. We knew what was going on all over the country. We understood how this potential prosecution weighed in with regard to the other work that the Department of Justice was doing. And so now this proposed move to take that layer of review out. If a U.S. attorney wants to prosecute a congressperson, then he or she can. They still have to get the approval of the Attorney General, but as we were just discussing, that person is Pam Bondi. She's going to say yes to whatever Donald Trump wants, including now this potential of political prosecutions. Think about what happened in New Jersey, where allegedly congresspeople are being investigated now for just doing their job, for going to a facility that they're supposed to conduct oversight of. So typically, that would come to the public integrity section. We'd say yes or no, that can be prosecuted. Now, if Alina Habba wants to do that, she can.
Liz, this gets to retribution.
Yeah.
I mean, the president made it clear during the campaign that he was going to go after his political enemies, and the moment he got inaugurated, he just started, and he continues. I think we have a graphic of the prominent people that he has targeted. Paul talked about the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, the potential of arrests of members of Congress, but he's also gone after judges and prosecutors. What does that do to the people like yourself, like you and Paul, former prosecutors, who are the front line in terms of the defense of the rule of law?
Yeah, so it's a total misuse of the department's resources. The resources of the Department of Justice are meant to keep us safe, to uphold our laws, and to uphold our civil rights. And they're being used right now to defeat those very interests, which is very concerning. What's happening with the leadership of the department is the shots are really being called in the White House. The New York Times article you referenced reported that Stephen Miller, who is not even an attorney, is actually the person who is making all of the decisions that are then being pushed down to the Department of Justice. So that is not how things have ever operated in our history. And it's on issues that are big and important, but it's also on minutia. And if I could just share a quick anecdote.
Yeah.
When I was at the department before I was fired, we were getting bombarded daily with these orders from the Attorney General. Pam Bondi is signing memos to the workforce that are giving us our marching orders, telling us, you are all the president's lawyers, carry out his mission. And it got down so far into the minutia that we got a memo to the 115,000 employees of the department saying the Department of Justice is abolishing paper straws, because the president doesn't like paper straws. So it is our obligation as attorneys in the Department of Justice to eradicate the scourge of paper straws and replace them with plastic. I mean,
Liz,
it's Looney Tunes.
There are real things happening in this country, serious things that people are dealing with.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on politically. And so, I'm gobsmacked that the people who are who spend their lives thinking about the rule of law, defending and protecting the rule of law, the Constitution, are being asked to do things just because, Donald Trump doesn't want to do them. I guess I probably shouldn't be as shocked as I am because of where we are politically. But I guess, what? I am just like, I just can't believe. So how is
Usually I'm the one.
I know.
I can't talk.
What is the mood inside DOJ as these things have happened?
Well, a lot of people took advantage of the second DOJ buyout offer recently because they declined the first one. They saw how things were going. And after seeing it for a couple of months, they said, oh, no, this is not for me. So people have fled the department.
Brain drain.
Yeah. I mean, lots of incredibly smart, talented lawyers who have spent years or even decades at the department have left because the morale is low and people feel like they do not have the freedom to share their views, and they feel like they're not supported in their mission, and they feel like they're being asked to do things that are not appropriate.
It wasn't the first lie ever told before the United States Senate, and it certainly won't be the last. But what Attorney General Pam Bondi said before the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee this afternoon may very well go down as one of the most brazen, most shameless, most verifiably false statements ever uttered in that setting. Quote, the two-tiered system of justice is over? In fact, if Bondi's on-the-record testimony today served to prove anything out in public, anything at all, it is that a two-tiered system of justice has very much been operationalized, is the new reality in the United States of America right now. Just ask former FBI Director Jim Comey, whose recent federal indictment, initiated mere days after a public pressure campaign, was a frequent topic of inquiry this afternoon. Again and again and again, Bondi refused to answer questions on the matter, questions about Eric Siebert. He's the now former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. He was forced to resign after he concluded that there was not sufficient evidence to indict Jim Comey, and questions about potential coordination between Donald Trump and the Department of Justice. Watch.
The night before James Comey's indictment, you had dinner with the President of the United States. Pretty intimate group.
Actually, there were a lot of people there that night. That's a great picture.
Was James Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture. And there were a lot of people there that night. I think the entire cabinet was there.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes. 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any conversations I've had or not have with the President of the United States.
Because the American public is entitled to know, Madam Attorney General.
The entire cabinet was at that dinner.
Whether you took instructions from President Trump after he told you very directly to indict James Comey, which is weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Her refusal to answer legitimate questions, and if anything, to seem to make a mockery of the setting and the body itself, and to refuse to address those questions regarding ongoing controversies at the Department of Justice wasn't just focused on the Comey prosecution. It extended to the latest reporting on Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, and allegations that he accepted $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents last year.
What became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI paid to Mr. Homan in a paper bag, evidently?
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
I can see I'm not going to get a straight answer from you to a very simple question.
By the FBI agents and the DOJ. They found no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and you rail against dark money.
Wait a second.
You work with dark money groups all the time. Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here.
Another exhausting non-answer, seemingly read from some sort of opposition research book that didn't meet the caliber of something on a congressional campaign, from a sitting attorney general today, who was far more concerned with launching those ad hominem attacks on Democratic lawmakers exclusively, the ones asking the tough questions, than she was in doing what her job says she should do, which is answer questions in that setting, and what she said she would do, which is to end a two-tiered system of justice. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. MSNBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian is here. Also joining us, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here, and former Democratic Senator, MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill's here. Claire, I'm going to start with you because I think you're the only person here who may have recognized her attacks as just run-of-the-mill sort of flunky campaign-level oppo that was in her binder along with a bunch of prepared statements. I've never seen that before. Have you?
Oh, no. I've never seen anything like this by a low-level witness off the street, much less the Attorney General, the sitting Attorney General of the United States. And you're right. It's low-level oppo BS. But here's the thing that's stunning about her testimony today. I am shocked that no Republican on the committee spoke up when the Attorney General of the United States spent the entire time of her questioning by Democratic senators screaming, refusing to answer basic oversight questions, and attacking them with ad hominem, not factual attacks that were personal in nature. And no one said a word on the Republican side, especially the chairman of the committee, Chuck Grassley. This never would have been allowed to go on when I was in the United States Senate. There would have been a bipartisan effort to stop that witness in their tracks. That's how far the Republican Party in the United States Senate has fallen. And the members of that Judiciary Committee with an R behind their names, they are single-handedly, brick by brick, undoing the power of the Senate to have oversight in one of the most legendary committees in history. And they are permanently impacting the ability of our democracy to function as our founding fathers intended. And it was a shocking display, and it was so stupid and ugly and frankly embarrassing. I'm really surprised no one spoke up, not one of them.
Ken Dilanian, you were monitoring this for us. I guess I would point out the mission was obviously to vamp for Fox News clips. She probably scored high marks for that endeavor. I'm sure she'll look great tonight. But Trump is sitting at a 37% approval rating, and one of the most unpopular things he's doing is weaponizing the Department of Justice. 70% of Americans oppose sort of a vague question about weaponization, and the number goes higher when you put in indicting Jim Comey, indicting these people. He doesn't even bring along all of the people who voted for him less than 1 year ago. What was this about, in your view?
It was about not answering questions, Nicole, first and foremost, because these were questions that were that the answers to which I think really put the Trump administration in a very difficult position. Why did you fire the U.S. attorney who wouldn't bring the case? Did Tom Homan take the money? These are questions they don't want to answer. And so the strategy was, as you said, to read from an oppo sheet and to attack each senator individually. And, you know, you could debate about whether the Democrats had a good strategy to rebut that. I personally don't think that they did, although some did better than others. But you're right. Claire is absolutely right. We've never seen anything like this before. Christopher Wray used to go up there and get railed by the Republicans on the Hill. They would attack him left, right, and center, making baseless allegations, and he would just sit there and take it because that's what he thought was his role as FBI director, not to fight back, not to read from an oppo sheet, and no doubt he could have as the FBI director. But one of the most striking things to me about today was that there were a lot of questions that she could hide behind. That's a pending investigation, or I don't talk about personnel matters. But one thing one place where that does not apply is the Tom Homan matter, because that is a closed investigation. There's nothing pending about it. And so it's hard for me to imagine that she doesn't know the factual answer to the question of did he actually accept the money from an FBI undercover and what happened to that money. I mean, if she's seen the files, if she's talked to anybody who's reviewed that case, she knows the answer to that question, and she refused to answer it today, and she has no good reason to answer it, and not to answer it, rather. And that is a fundamental question that I think we can all agree, like, the American public has a right to that information. This person who's wielding enormous power in the government right now, according to our sources and according to a document we've seen, accepted $50,000 from undercover FBI agents in a sting as part of a corruption investigation. The Justice Department dropped that investigation. They're telling us it was reviewed and there was no crime found, but they won't release any of the documents, and they won't even tell us the basic facts. Did he keep the money? If he did he pay taxes on it? So that to me was the most extraordinary moment of an extraordinary day.
I mean, Ken, two follow-up questions for you on that. I mean, I think they did more than what you just articulated. Today, Fox News is reporting that the FBI fired and dismantled the entire corruption squad. It was ostensibly about phone records being swept up in the investigation of the insurrection on January 6th. But they don't just excuse their own. They destroy the law enforcement capability that might damage their own. What did they say about that, if anything?
This was, Nicole, an insidious triumph of right-wing propaganda, because Chuck Grassley releases this redacted FBI document that shows that the FBI, as part of the Jack Smith investigation, obtained the tolling records, to and from records that are the property of the phone company and that are obtainable by a subpoena, not a warrant, not a court order, but a subpoena. The FBI obtained those in the course of investigating the insurrection. But Grassley puts that out. Right-wing media explodes in rage and calls this spying on Republican senators. And by the time it gets to the hearing, when sort of mainstream reporters like me are just trying to figure out what is this all about and what's the context here, you have senators saying that they were wiretapped, which was just a fantasy. That's not what happened. What this was Jack Smith trying to figure out who Donald Trump was calling when he was trying to delay the certification. This is according to my sources, of the 2020 election. He was talking to members of Congress, and it wasn't just, he has multiple cell phones, he goes through intermediaries, and there was a reference to this in the Smith report. He talks about Trump calling members of Congress, and he also talks about consulting with public integrity about the proper way to investigate that and how to obtain documents. So this is perfectly legitimate. These senators were not targeted. They were not under investigation. They were essentially witnesses in this investigation, but they've made it into this fake scandal, and now it's having real-world repercussions because, as you said, Kash Patel just announced not long ago that he's firing FBI agents and disbanding a corruption squad. This is not the first corruption squad they disbanded, by the way. They had previously disbanded one in the Washington field office whose job was to investigate corruption in Congress, ironically enough. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. These FBI agents are losing their jobs because they did what they were asked to do in a lawfully predicated investigation, and another corruption squad looking at public corruption doesn't exist. And a lot of people think that right now no one in the FBI or the Justice Department is examining public corruption unless it's something that Donald Trump wants them to look at.
Donald Trump's political albatross has now come knocking on the door of the Oval Office. Now that the bill to release all files related to the criminal case of Donald Trump's former friend, the dead sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, has passed with near unanimous support from Congress, all that's left is Donald Trump's signature. Once the bill is signed, Team Trump will be stuck in a trap largely of their own making. The administration could have fulfilled a campaign pledge and released all the files months ago. Remember this?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that.
But now, after months of stonewalling, the Trump administration is bound by law, a law just passed by Congress to release all of the Epstein files. And frankly, the world is watching to see if there's any chance they comply. Here's what Attorney General Pam Bondi had to say when she was asked if the investigation Trump ordered into Democrats will be an excuse to stop the release.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
Following the law and maximum transparency when it comes to the Epstein files, public isn't buying it. Those are two things this Department of Justice is not known for, even among Republicans. Again, if Pam Bondi wanted transparency when it comes to the Epstein material, she could have released the files instead of publishing an unsigned memo that said she wasn't gonna, that sought to sweep the whole thing under the rug. Comments like her comments today, though, are part of a pattern by Team Trump that suggests anything but maximum transparency. From that unsigned memo back in July to the shifting explanations for why Epstein and Trump had a falling out, to the preferential treatment the Trump administration has given to Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. On that front, NBC News has some new reporting that the Bureau of Prisons has fired the whistleblower who alleged to House Democrats that Maxwell was getting, quote, VIP treatment, as Congressman Jamie Raskin describes it. From that new reporting, quote, a whistleblower who came forward to House Democrats alleging convicted sex offender Ghislaine Maxwell received preferential treatment at a federal prison camp in Texas says she was not motivated by politics. Instead, quote, this was about common human decency and doing what's right for all inmates. That was Noella Turnage, a nurse who worked at the federal prison camp Bryan since 2019. She said that the Federal Bureau of Prisons fired her on November 10th. The decision came one day after the top Democrat on the committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, wrote a letter to President Donald Trump saying they had received information from a whistleblower indicating Maxwell was working on filing a commutation application and receiving special treatment not typically afforded to inmates at Bryan. A brand new chapter in the push for transparency around the Epstein case is where we start today. Joining us, Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. He has been pivotal in the push for the release of the Epstein files. Did you think 24, 72 hours ago that the vote to release the files would be near unanimous in the House and the Senate?
I did not. I mean, look, we were hoping that we could get maybe first 12 to 20 Republicans just a week ago. Then it became clear that we might get up to 100 Republicans just a few days ago. And then, of course, with Trump's complete panic when he knew he was going to lose the vote in a spectacular way, only then did we, of course, see the Speaker and others chime in where the vote became essentially unanimous. And the action, of course, of the Senate. This is a huge win for transparency, for the American public, for good government. But most importantly, this is a win for the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, who have been demanding action now for years. And so it's a good day for this country, but there is a lot of work ahead of us in the future.
Let me center our conversation then around the victims. Here is an Epstein survivor talking about something that people don't always remember that they hold, and that is the power to name names if they choose to. Let me play that for you.
Let me ask you something else, because, again, it's much bigger than a couple of people. Were you trafficked to other people?
What do I, can I?
You can say yes, but you don't have to name names.
You only share what
Sorry.
you want to share.
no,
You don't have to be sorry for anything. And I'm asking you this because I think it's important to understand, as people do understand about Virginia's story, that it's not about just one person or two people. It's much bigger than that. You can share whatever you want to share.
Terrible things had happened to me within my time with dealing with Jeffrey Epstein. I had encounters with people that I would rather not have.
I think there's a lot of people that just want them to release the names. They're like, well, you have the names, just do it. The problem with that is that these rich and powerful men they can sue you into homelessness, would be a big part of it, but B, it puts serious threat on your life and your family's life. There were times where my sister was sitting across people and they would push a picture of her own children in front of her and essentially say, I know where your kids go to school.
I know where your kids go to school. This is what the victims are dealing with right now.
That's right. And Nicole, I've spent some time talking to some of these survivors one-on-one whenever I can. I do that. I just did so a few days ago with another survivor. And one of the stories that she shared was about her sensing and knowing that she was being watched and that her home was being essentially watched and followed, and that she really feared the safety for herself and her family. So you can only imagine when some of the most powerful men in the country with unlimited resources and unlimited connections to the highest levels of government, what that feels like to be surviving, to know the trauma you've been through, but want to just protect your family, yourself, and your friends. And so we have to allow these survivors to tell their story on their time. But rest assured, the Oversight Committee and certainly Democrats on that committee, we are taking great care in our conversations with these survivors, and they're providing us very important information that we're very grateful for.
Who's watching them?
The question, who's following them?
Who's following them? Yeah. I mean, is it a government official or a private person's?
I'm not going to. I think that oftentimes they're not sure, and I'm not going to speak for all of them. In the conversations that I have had, I know of 2 survivors that have directly told me that they certainly felt that they were being watched in the past, and that there was some type of surveillance happening that they felt to themselves and their family. And that's very serious. And so that's something that we take very seriously, and their protection and their safety in this moment is incredibly important to us. And we know that right now, Donald Trump has the power to release the files. He didn't need the vote in the Congress. He didn't need the subpoena that Oversight Committee Democrats placed on the files. Yet he continues to deny justice and closure and some sense of being able to move forward for these women and their families. And so this is an important moment right now where there's progress being made, but there's a lot of work ahead of us on the financial documents, on ensuring the files are released by the DOJ, on Pam Bondi being held accountable for her actions. And those are things you're going to hear a lot about in the coming days. If Donald Trump and the White House thinks that we're slowing down or this is over, they are mistaken. We are actually just beginning this work.
What does it even mean that Trump has ordered an investigation into Democrats? If you're investigating the deceased sex offender, don't you start with the known criminals, Epstein and Maxwell, and follow the facts? I mean, what do you understand the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, to have undertaken? An investigation whose ends are known, or an actual fact-driven investigation?
Nicole, this is a really good question. I want to actually make something really clear. I've heard some discussion on your network and others about the difference between, for example, the discharge petition that Congress voted on almost unanimously and the subpoena that's in place, that the Oversight Committee put in place. They both ask for the same things, which are full release of the documents. Pam Bondi, in the clip you showed earlier, said, well, we've already released 33,000 documents. That's because Oversight Democrats forced a subpoena that's currently still in place for all of the documents, and she was responding to that subpoena. Now, we know that those documents were essentially already available to the public, so it was just a smokescreen. But that was a response to our subpoena. The discharge petition and the law in front of the president is another way of getting the documents. But here's where this investigation you're discussing is important. We know that that is a sham investigation. We believe it's being set up because in the law that was passed in the Khanna and Massey bill, there is a provision in there that essentially speaks to that the Department of Justice is able to possibly withhold some materials if there is an ongoing federal investigation. This has been discussed at length. And so folks are worried, is Pam Bondi, is Donald Trump, are they launching an investigation, particularly this one against Democrats, to use it as a way to stop the release of the files and of this bill? And that is a critical concern. What has not been discussed in the last few days, and we've been focused on this bill, I want to remind the Attorney General and the public that our subpoena does not have that language. And so if the Attorney General wants to use her sham investigation in the Southern District of New York to withhold evidence and documents on the bill that the president will hopefully just about to sign. She can't do the same for our subpoena. She is still legally obligated, regardless of any investigation, to produce every single document, photo, video, or material that she has in her possession of the DOJ to the Oversight Committee. That's something that we have not talked about a lot in the last few days because our focus is on this bill. But you can believe that in the next few days and weeks ahead, we're going to remind the DOJ that her investigation she might try to use to stop the effort in the full House. She can't use that to stop the effort we have in the Oversight Committee.
It wasn't just that she deflected. It was how she deflected that made it so embarrassing for her. In fact, at times, Bondi was so obnoxious and so disruptive that she had to be repeatedly, if gently, blocked by Jim Jordan from shouting over her questioners, and that is how it was covered. I mean, Jim Jordan is the voice of reason. You kind of know things are going off the rails. Listen, I've prepped a lot of people for these hearings, as I was just saying to Chris. I have watched hundreds of them, and this one is, well, pretty easy to analyze. Because over the course of those 5 hours, Attorney General Pam Bondi made an absolute fool of herself, evading questions, childlessly shouting down lawmakers, talking back, and even resorting to name-calling, all while attempting some of the most ridiculous and poorly executed diversions I have ever seen. But why just read you the reviews? I just wanted to start there when I can take you to the actual show. Here was Pam Bondi being asked a very simple question about why the Justice Department has not brought new charges against anyone in the Epstein files.
So I really have just one question for you. How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
This administration released over 3 million pages of documents, over 3 million, and Donald Trump signed that law to release all of those documents. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history. And none of them asked Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over, the Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
I mean, I don't know why more people weren't laughing in exasperation at the absurdity of her answer. I mean, Pam Bondi was asked why she hadn't investigated any of Epstein's co-conspirators. And she basically said, because the Dow is over 50,000. I mean, I guess her argument is, do we really want our Justice Department investigating an elite cabal of pedophiles at a time when their stock portfolios are doing so well? Guess this is the Attorney General of the United States, though. I mean, she's a person that is supposed to make big, important, sober, prosecutorial decisions. A person that is supposed to be independent of the president, who she worshipped through the course of a 5-hour hearing, publicly, out loud. And she's supposed to be independent of politics in general. But for most of this hearing, it felt like Pam Bondi was not really acting as the Attorney General, and more like she was auditioning for the role of a Trump campaign spokesperson. I mean, here she was responding to a comment about her office's handling of the killings of U.S. citizens Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
The DOJ is not collaborating with state and local law enforcement on these homicides. So I really think that is a disgraceful approach to the homicides of American citizens, and really does nothing to bring credit to your department. And, Mr. Chairman, I would yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
May I answer?
Attorney General can respond.
I find it interesting that she keeps going after President Trump, the greatest president in American history.
DOJ isn't collaborating with local law enforcement to investigate the death of American citizens. That was in the question. It's an important thing to ask. And Pam Bondi's response is, Donald Trump is the greatest president in American history. And did I mention the Dow, which remains perhaps one of the most absurd moments of the hearing? It's like she was kind of a social media bot of sorts, replying with random non sequiturs and AI-generated images of Donald Trump with a six-pack, or the verbal version of that. Can you imagine Merrick Garland answering a question like that? Hell, I mean, can you imagine Bill Barr answering a question like that? And the thing is, it kept going like that over and over and over. Every time she was asked a serious question about something within her job description, she evaded, either by attacking the questioner or by really over the top glorifying her boss.
Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done.
Okay, to state the obvious, but we got to restate it sometimes. The question of whether or not the current sitting president of the United States attended any parties with a sexual predator where underage girls were present is not ridiculous at all. I think everybody wants to know the answer to that question. Also, by the way, it wasn't exactly a 7-parter. She could have just said no if she knew the answer was no. And it wasn't just her refusal to provide a basic answer. That was certainly part of it. When given the opportunity to honor the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, who were literally right behind her in that hearing room, she refused.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand. Will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions. The witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer. The Attorney General can
That's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she doesn't
It is
like the
my
answer.
time.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't she ask
question.
Merrick Garland this?
I am
twice
reclaiming
when he
my
sat in
time,
chair?
and when I
will
reclaim my
continue to
time,
answer.
it is
Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady's reclaimed her
I'm not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
The time belongs to the time belongs to the gentlelady. The gentlelady has 17 seconds.
Thank you. You're not going to answer this question, so let me just
Chairman,
say
I'll
this.
direct it to
What a
you.
massive
No, I'm
cover-up.
answering a
Mr.
question.
Chairman, will you restore her time? The witness
I'm
is
not going to get in
interrupting.
the gutter with this woman.
Stop the
She's
time.
doing theatrics.
Let me.
I mean, there was a lot telling about that exchange, including the fact that Pam Bondi, if you noted this, refused to even look at Epstein's survivors. And that says a lot. It's not the only shocking thing, though, to come out of that exchange. As Bondi was going back and forth with Congresswoman Jayapal, a photographer in the room snapped this photo of the binder in front of Pam Bondi. And if you zoom in, and we're going to do that for you, and rotate that image to take a closer look, you can clearly see that the page is labeled Jayapal Pramila Search History. And it appears to list all of the Epstein files that Congresswoman Jayapal privately viewed on the Justice Department's computers, where lawmakers can view the unredacted versions of the files. Now, after that image became public, Congresswoman Jayapal told MS Now's tireless, intrepid reporter Ali Vitale, quote, "It's totally inappropriate. Is this the whole reason they opened the files up to us 2 days early? So they could essentially surveil members to see what we were going to ask her about?" Good question. I mean, that was essentially an Oppo document in the binder of the Attorney General saying what a person who was going to be questioning her had searched just a few days ago. And I hope others start asking it. I mean, throughout the entire hearing, Bondi made it clear that her goal was to basically not answer questions, of course, but fight with every Democratic member of the committee, no matter what their questions were. At one point, Congresswoman Becca Balint got up and walked out of the hearing over Bondi's attacks.
Do the right thing, Attorney General. Meet with the survivors. They have been asking for a year. Meet with the survivors. Do the right thing. I yield back.
I was curious if you, Congresswoman, asked Bill Clinton that. Didn't see one tweet, not one. I didn't see one tweet when Joe Biden was in office about Bill Clinton. Didn't ask Merrick Garland anything about Epstein, not once when he was.
Weak sauce.
And also, I want the record to reflect that, with this anti-Semitic culture right now, she voted against a resolution condemning.
Oh,
is
Jewish.
Jewish.
I
just want to be clear.
Do you want to go there, Attorney General? Or do you want to go there? Are you serious? Talking about anti-Semitism to a woman who lost her grandfather in the Holocaust?
You heard that correctly. Yes, Congresswoman Becca Balint's grandfather died in the Holocaust, and Pam Bondi just accused her of being anti-Semitic instead of agreeing to meet with Epstein survivors. That's what just happened there. And again, these weren't just isolated incidents. And what I would consider perhaps the clearest sign that she was either completely out of her depth or unprepared with no good answers or a combination, her go-to move during the hearing was to repeatedly behave like some sort of over-caffeinated high school mean girl.
This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed politician.
Not a complicated question.
Well, I guess it is for you because you have a law degree and those are privileged. Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the rules again.
Have you apologized to President Trump? Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? Nothing about helping crime in her district. She's not even worth getting into the details. Excuse me, I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer. You don't get to reclaim time when you don't.
Bigger than Watergate.
When I don't answer the question the way you want. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
But we're going to move back to you.
I bet we are.
Yes, of course, because you're here to testify.
The whole thing is given a grown-up version of Regina George from Mean Girls. You know who I'm talking about. Now, for Pam Bondi, this entire hearing was about putting on a show, obviously. So her boss could see her yelling at lawmakers he doesn't like. That's the whole thing. But Donald Trump was not the only one watching this hearing. I mean, whether it's the Epstein files or the killing of American citizens in Minneapolis, the entire country has taken an interest in what this Department of Justice is doing. We know this. They're paying attention. And if they tuned into this hearing, they saw an administration making a mockery of their priorities. They saw a Department of Justice that only cares about one person, one man sitting in the White House. While at the same time, they saw responsible lawmakers ask tough questions and center the people who really matter in all of this.
Breaking news, MS now confirming Pam Bondi is out as Attorney General. Todd Blanche is in, at least as interim director. I want to bring in the guy who broke this story for us, MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor, along with Jonathan Capehart, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and host of MS Now's The Weekend. Here in studio, MS Now congressional reporter Michael Chanel. Jake, tell us what you learned.
Yeah, Chris, this is obviously happening all in real time. But MS Now has now confirmed from a White House official that Attorney General Pam Bondi has been removed from her role, which then would subsequently lead to the fact that Todd Blanche is now the acting interim Attorney General. As you noted just a moment ago, the White House official told me that we expect to hear from Blanche, at least on social media or a post about it, in the very near future. I was told from a former White House official we can also expect a truth from the president, a Truth Social post from President Trump momentarily now. This is all, of course, is happening in real time. I will note that Blanche is now serving as the interim. There still appears to be an active, ongoing consideration of and building of a short list of who might eventually fill that role more permanently. Folks from inside the White House and outside have floated the names like Lee Zeldin, Alina Habba, Jeanine Pirro, Senator Eric Schmidt. So there's a lot of these folks that are floating around as to who the president may be inclined to pick. Look, we know, Chris, that for months, internal White House officials have told MS Now that there have essentially been knives out for Pam Bondi. Really, this began with her handling of the Epstein files. This was building all along. But another White House official told me that unlike we've seen the ousting of other White House officials in this second administration of the president's, this time around, the president has a real fondness for Bondi and didn't want to just make the Truth Social post announcing she had been fired or was being demoted. Instead, this time around, the president told her in some type of private conversation, hoping that she could land on her feet more positively, leaving this role after the reporting has come out over the past couple of days, and particularly over the past couple of hours, that Bondi's role is imminently being removed. It seems as though the president, in some way or the other, has made some type of decision that Bondi has been removed, that Blanche is now acting interim. The story is developing in real time, and that short list is what we're, of course, now chasing after to try and understand who the president may permanently now replace Bondi with.
And I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes because I want to talk through some of the pros and cons of the people who you just named are on the short list. But let's keep it in the moment here, Jonathan. As Jake rightfully points out, we've all known that over the last few days, the buzz has been building about Pam Bondi getting the ouster. But what do you make of the fact that it's happened now?
Well, two thoughts come to mind. My first thought was this, to me, sort of showed just how perhaps inside the White House, last night's speech about the war didn't go over so well. And so this is a perfect distraction to get us away from talking about last night's speech and talking about something that is way closer to home and more and consequential for this administration. The second thing that comes to mind, Chris, is this. Even though Jake reporting that the president wanted to, he has a fondness for Attorney General Bondi, it reminds me of what happened with now former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, where the chatter was out there and then the removal happened. And I remember the removal happened, and Kristi Noem, back to then Secretary Kristi Noem, was giving a speech outside of Washington, and everyone wondered. I remember watching our colleague Katie Tur wondering, does she know she's been removed? So at least in this case, Attorney General Bondi was informed by the president herself and had some time to process it before it went public. But this is pretty incredible, and I am eager to see who is on this short list. And sort of play the parlor game. I guess Michael will be able to help us with this, and Jake. Who would actually be able to get confirmed?
Well, yeah, I want to go back to that. But can we just remind folks, Jonathan, about Todd Blanche? Now, first of all, he was the president's lawyer, right? When there was the 34-count indictment against him. He loses that case, but, and this is a huge but, he was able to use the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity to delay any sentencing until after the election, which, of course, the president won. One would have to think that Todd Blanche, for all the other rumors that are out there, has got to be high on that short list. But what do you think?
Oh, good. I was thinking we were going to come to that later. Yes, if I were the president, I would just elevate Todd Blanche. He is the number 2 at the Justice Department. He knows him. He trusts him. He is acting as his personal attorney, even though he is supposed to be Deputy Attorney General of the United States. If he doesn't choose Deputy Attorney General Blanche, it would behoove the president to choose. I think Jake mentioned a senator whose name might be in the mix. Choose someone from the Senate, which would make it a little bit easier to get that person confirmed. But Alina Habba, Jeanine Pirro, wow, good luck with those selections if the president does decide to do something as crazy as that.
Okay, we have the posting from Donald Trump. And here's what he says on Truth Social. It's long, so stay with me here. Pam Bondi is a great American patriot and a loyal friend who faithfully served as my attorney general over the past year. Pam did a tremendous job overseeing a massive crackdown in crime across our country, with murders plummeting to their lowest level since 1900. We love Pam, and she will be transitioning to a much-needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. And our Deputy Attorney General and a very talented and respected legal mind, Todd Blanche, will step in to serve as acting Attorney General. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump, which leads me to you, Michael, which is, first of all, I have two questions. First about the reaction, and then obviously about who could get confirmed. Let's start with reaction. What are folks on the Hill texting to you because your fingers have been flying since you sat down?
Yeah, immediate reaction. Again, as Jake mentioned, Pam Bondi was on the ropes since this reporting started coming out late last night, early this morning. A lot of reaction. First from Democrats saying essentially good riddance, literally good riddance. Ted Lieu, he's one of the top Democrats in the House. He said goodbye and good riddance to Pam Bondi. You were exceptionally terrible at your job. It's bipartisan. Folks who aren't sad about him leaving. Nancy Mace, she was one of those Republicans who signed the discharge petition to release the Epstein files. She has been beating the drum on that issue, the issue that Pam Bondi has drawn so much criticism for. She wrote on X saying, if the reports that Lee Zeldin will be replacing Pam Bondi as Attorney General are true, I welcome it. Bondi handled the Epstein files in a terrible manner and made the situation far worse than it had to be for President Trump. I look forward to a new Attorney General committed to getting justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Chris, one thing to keep an eye on is that the Oversight Committee last month had issued a subpoena for Pam Bondi to appear before the panel to discuss the handling of the Epstein files. It was something that was largely talked about as a bipartisan vote, and there are a lot of questions now about, well, what exactly will happen with that subpoena date. She was called to appear on April 14th. We do have a statement from Robert Garcia. He's the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, which oversaw that subpoena. He said he still expects Pam Bondi. She should still have to come in, writing in a statement. Attorney General Pam Bondi has been leading a White House cover-up of the Epstein files. She has weaponized the Department of Justice to protect Donald Trump and put survivors in harm's way by exposing their identities. Here's the key graph. She will not escape accountability and remains legally obligated to appear before our committee under oath. She must answer for her mishandling of the Epstein files and the special treatment she has given to Ghislaine Maxwell. So we're going to have to see how that pans out, but certainly.
Well, that's my question, because he is the ranking member. He is not the chairman. What do you think the chances are that still happens?
Well, I think frankly, I think there are a lot of still unanswered questions of, is the subpoena still alive and still valid, given that she was subpoenaed as Attorney General and she is no longer in that position. She's going to be somebody in the private sector. I think there are still just a lot of questions about the enforceability mechanisms, but certainly, you know, the immediate reaction right here from Democrats saying they are going to keep up the pressure on Pam Bondi to appear before their panel, because they have so many questions about the Epstein files, the handling of the investigation, which was, again, since Pam Bondi came out with those binders and said, we have the files, I mean, this has been the thing that she has just seen so much scrutiny for on both sides of the aisle.
So Todd Blanche has just posted on this. Pam Bondi led this department with strength and conviction, and I'm grateful for her leadership and friendship. Thank you to President Trump for the trust and the opportunity to serve as acting Attorney General. We will continue backing the blue, enforcing the law, and doing everything in our power to keep America safe. Could he get confirmed?
Well, the way that nominations work in the Senate is that you just need a majority, right? And so Republicans, of course, have the 53-47 majority over Democrats. So it is plausible that he could get confirmed unless there are any hiccups along the way. Though it will be an interesting process, confirmation hearings, all the such. But again, this is the important part of when the filibuster, the 60-vote filibuster was nixed for nominations years ago. This is one of the byproducts of that if there even is a change of the seat in the middle of a term, it just requires a majority, and Republicans certainly have that in the Senate.
Anybody else on that list, Jonathan, you think sounds like somebody who could get through not just the Republican Senate, but maybe even get support from the Democratic side, or absolutely not?
I don't know. Jake,
Jeanine Pirro couldn't get Democratic votes? Is that what you're suggesting?
At 100%, Jeanine Pirro would not get a single Democratic vote, nor would Alina Habba. I think I'm not sure about Lee Zeldin, but one of the reasons why my attention is focused on Todd Blanche is because, one, of his tight relationship with the president. As we all know, that arm's length relationship between the White House and the Justice Department no longer exists. But the other thing that I think Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has going for him is that he is an attorney, and he is an attorney, at least before he joined Trump's orbit, with a stellar reputation. And I think he would bring a seriousness to the job that current Attorney General Pam Bondi frittered her way at multiple hearings where she used those hearings basically to roast Democrats on panels than to answer questions from the elected representatives of the American people.